Good morning, you're very welcome along to Friday the 13th edition of Off the Ball AM. It's myself, Eoin Sheahan, here in studio alongside Johnny Ward. A very good morning to you, Johnny.
How are you, Eoin? That's an ominous start.
Very ominous. I said I'd just mention it out there just to spook everybody. I just realised it myself. Didn't know kind of misdemeanour just yet. You flew home from Barcelona yesterday. Which you picked the right day to fly. I'm not sure, is that kind of...
Yeah, I certainly don't believe in that nonsense, you know, but I flew back in, got back in around 10 to 6, and I was like, Dublin's a great airport to fly through in that they don't like mess around. They're just like off you go, like at the passport control. I think they're just like, you know, let the man back into the country or whatever, and sometimes they even call you by your first name.
yeah.
Like it's just a nice touch, whatever. But I was loads of time to get to Tala. Traffic was an absolute nightmare. Just had to abandon, so I didn't get to Shamrock Rovers game, but I was really hoping to, so watched it on TV instead.
Yeah, we will chat about Shamrock Rovers, we will chat about the rest of the League of Ireland teams in Europe, and indeed the situation at Bray a little bit later on in the show. You were in Barcelona over the course of the last couple of days?
Yeah, Pearl Jam gig, just catching up with a few mates. Was very nostalgic because I suppose it was a band we would have listened to when we were kids, and first time in Barcelona. What a city.
Is it your first time in Barcelona?
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Just beautiful architecture, friendly people as well, and yeah, it was fun times.
Yeah, I'd say so. How was the gig?
The gig was great. Yeah, it was. You know, a lot of people listening in probably can remember listening to bands when you were, you know, a teenager or whatever. And that when you get to the mid-30s, then you catch up with your mates who got you into that music. It's nostalgia laden. Now, it had to be said. Was
Pearl Jam indicative of your general taste in music at the time?
It wasn't actually. No, I became a much less. Would you call Pearl Jam mainstream? I don't know. I became a lot more into like obscure stuff as I got older.
Like what?
Befitting being a League of Ireland fan. A lot of like ambient and atmospheric music and stuff like that. And even then it got into a lot of kind of guitar, just guitar music with John Fahey would be my favourite artist. So he would have brought out 50 records. He doesn't sing, he just plays guitar. And I'm going to a gig next Friday, Death in Vegas. They're another kind of one of those kind of just slightly left of centre bands, but yeah, but it was great. And Eddie Vedder is like mid-50s or whatever, but he sounds as fresh as ever. He was really good. Like,
good stuff. Have they been in Ireland recently? I think they're en route later on in the year.
They may have been last year. Yeah, I'd never seen them before as well. That was a mad thing. It was kind of just one of those a lot of firsts, but I did also learn not to drink IPA all day over there. It's something that I'm gonna bring to the future.
It's a key component of life's learnings, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We've all learned that the hard way, I think. You're back in time for the Super Race, which is something we're going to chat about.
Big weekend ahead.
Huge weekend ahead. And
excited for Croke Park.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's an absolute whopper weekend, I think. I think it's fair enough to say that about it. Particularly in GAA, you've got the World Cup final, you've got Wimbledon as well. There's a couple of other things as well we're going to get to throughout the course of this morning. Let's tell you what's coming up on OTBAM over the next hour, or 2 hours, I should say. The sports page is coming up in a couple of moments. We've got Quirke Super 8s. That's Mike Quirke from Kerry. He'll be on the line shortly after 8 o'clock to preview the weekend's action. JD in Moscow, that's our man Jon Duggan in Russia as he winds down with his last couple of days at the World Cup. He'll be previewing the World Cup final, chatting about his favourite World Cup finals in his memory and picking his player of the tournament. Wimbledon 18, Jon Wertheim of Sports Illustrated will join us at around 8:45. It's been a chaotic women's tournament there. Serena Williams through to the final tomorrow against Kerber. We'll preview that, and we look ahead to today's semi-finals as well. A huge game between Djokovic and Nadal a little bit later on in centre court. And League of Ireland in Europe. Johnny here in studio will run us down through everything that's happened over the last couple of days and bring us up to speed on what's happening with the Bray situation as well. The players have now seemingly voted to go on strike there. A rather grim situation. So we'll get to that before 9:30 this morning. But first of all, it's time for the back pages.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
We'll start with the Irish Independent this morning, and it is disgusted Conte set for a bitter Blues exit. Lawyers haggle over a £9 million payoff as players pay tribute following manager's departure. It's an unusual situation at Chelsea, unusual in the grand scheme of things, but probably predictable when it comes to the hierarchy that actually exists at Chelsea. It seems that Antonio Conte is holding out and not going to take another job so that he can get a £9 million payoff. Chelsea don't really want to pay the £9 million naturally, so there's going to be a bit of a legal standoff between Conte's people and the Chelsea hierarchy. Why the hell are they dealing with this now and not 6 weeks ago?
God forbid you ever leave Newstalk on, you know. It's going to be... yeah, it just seems a very dysfunctional club, doesn't it, you know, and it's just sad the way that to turn up at training and be told you were gone pretty much.
Yeah, the other couple of stories on the back of the Irish Independent this morning is Staunton admits walkout decision not taken lightly. Of course, Staunton saying that the decision, as I say, hadn't been taken lightly. She doesn't really say much. She was speaking last night and doesn't want to say anything until after their game against Cavan at the weekend. And we move on to the Irish Examiner this morning because they lead with a story we want to chat about. It's Dan Dare. Stunning stage win means tour already a success for Dan Martin, and a success it is. An unbelievable performance from Dan Martin yesterday. It's a sensational conclusion to his stage 6 at the Moor de Britannia, the Wall of Brittany as they call it, Johnny. A big climb at the end. Martin breaks away with 1,200 metres to go, surges ahead of the field. Sky and BMC try to catch him, they can't, and Dan Martin holds out for the win. I think we can actually hear a little bit of Dan Martin. He was speaking to reporters after the stage win yesterday.
To be honest, my first thought is that I really hope my wife hasn't just gone into labour. You know, it's a great feeling to actually get a win again. So many second places at the tour since the last one, and Also, I was a bit nervous because of the headwind. I didn't think it was going to happen, you know, but. Then the race went so hard at the first part of the climb, I saw everybody's on the limit and there's no teammates left, so why not have a try? So I did.
Yeah, Dan Martin there speaking after winning the stage. It's his second time winning a stage at the Tour de France, and he's come close a couple of other times. Like he finished 6th overall last year. He came 2nd on the Planche de Béfi last year, which was kind of one of those amazing stages where he came so close to winning that exact stage, and like coming 6th overall. He was really in the picture for the entire thing last year, chasing down Chris Froome, but it didn't happen for him. Then 2016, you had another 2nd place and a 2nd place as well on the stage in 2015. So a couple of runners up spots over the last couple of years. This was coming, and it was an impressive feat. Wasn't a great start to the season for him as a whole, but this has really made it for him. And like
his missus is expecting twins as well. I think he spoke about that afterwards. They got a positive scan on that.
Yeah.
So good times for Dan Martin at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think she's due in October. So he was saying afterwards, I hope she doesn't go into labour after all of this. It's like it's an unusual one, isn't it? Like watching the Tour de France, kind of from a neutral perspective, and kind of sitting there. Like I love watching it. I love watching every stage whenever I possibly can. There's something beautiful about it, obviously, but also the competitive nature of it when it gets to the last couple of kilometres, especially inside 10 kilometres. I'm usually glued to the TV to see what happens, and it's like I wouldn't have necessarily been into the Tour as much when Martin last won a stage at the Tour, which was the last time an Irish person won a stage at the Tour. So it's an odd feeling because, like, naturally we're always casting a sceptical eye on the entire thing, and when an Irishman wins it, you don't really know how to when they win a stage, you don't really know how to feel.
That's the terrible thing about cycling now, isn't it? You know, it's just hard to I guess. Just with so much controversy, I would have virtually no interest in cycling for a lot for that reason, because I don't know what to believe anymore, you know. And I would say there are probably issues in football that people, you know, aren't aware of as well, and we don't think about that, and you know, it's not fair on cyclists. But yeah, I'd just be very sceptical. It's just so extreme that, you know.
Like in general, like I mean, it's not like nothing to do with Dan Martin or anything. It's just
absolutely
like once you're casting a sceptical eye on a sport in general,
absolutely,
you know, it's just a strange sensation.
It's like me trying to tell people about horse racing that it's not corrupt. Like, and you know, I might be telling people till they're blue in the face, but I'm not going to be able to convince some people that racing isn't, you know, entirely free of a bit of skullduggery, like which it obviously isn't. But it's a bit like that. It's just kind of some people won't. Some people, the amount of taxi drivers who tell me Irish racing is corrupt, like, you know, I'd never bet that, and I'm like, well, sure, I'm not going to convince you otherwise in the course of this cab ride. But I guess cycling's in a place that it's going to be hard to convince people.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's
and I'm by no means suggesting Dan Martin did anything, you know.
No, of course not.
But I think for the journeyman cyclist to win a stage must be terrific.
Yeah, like I think for Dan Martin, I think he's like a good bit above a journeyman cyclist, but like he will be a contender. He obviously had a very bad start to this tour. Obviously had a brilliant tour last year with Team UAE at the moment, and like all his teammates were just delighted for him. He's clearly their team leader and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how he performs once he comes into the mountains. Like he said, he was like running on adrenaline really yesterday, the way nobody caught him. He went so early. Like he was 1,200 meters to go, and on that
thinking
walk,
he's gonna die and fade, and he just holds on.
Yeah, like it's hard to kind of appreciate it on TV, but there is one camera angle when they're coming up right behind the breakaway when you can actually see the gradient, and it is steep. It is a steep finish. Like I think he came second on the Wall of Brittany as well a couple of years ago, the last time a stage finished there. So like in fair, like all things considered, it is a remarkable achievement. Like added to Sam Bennett, like it's just a fact that it has been a successful year for Irish cycling, regardless of what your view is.
It's becoming very popular in general in Ireland as well in terms of the actual activity.
Well, naturally, I guess it's the same with any water sports. It's the same with, like, we've got plenty of like gradients ourselves in the country. Like even Eoin Sheahan was doing a piece with him in the Irish Times last month, which we actually want to talk about now, because he was just saying that he was just going up through slopes in and around Ireland, down in Wicklow and stuff, and that was part of his tune-up after the Dauphiné, or maybe before the Dauphiné, before the Tour de France, and that Ireland is actually a good enough place for a GC contender in the Tour de France to actually train. Now, it's not heavy training, but it is training of some sort. You can keep yourself fine-tuned here. So you're right, it's a country conducive to success in the sport. But when it comes to Dan Martin, like, naturally you have to apply the same scrutiny of him as you have to of every other cyclist. And the one thing that you could definitely use as a stick to beat him with is just his attitude towards doping. And he's spoken about it before. Paul Kimmage did an interview with him last year in the Sunday Independent, where he had some interesting views on seeing doping firsthand and his relationship with it, and how he was kind of abhorred by teammates even suggesting that they would do anything like that, and how he's very principled and would never ever touch it. And then this year he was asked about Chris Froome last month, and that came up in the paper review on Sunday with Joe Dermot-Gillespie and Paul Kimmage at Ballyliffin. Have a look at this.
And look at the winner. You do look at the winner, because everybody has a contribution to make here, including our own Irish professionals. I mean, Christ almighty, I saw an interview with Dan Martin a couple of weeks ago where he's saying he can't comment on the Froome case because there's a clause in his contract where he's going to get. But look, you're not going to get it. You can't have it both ways. You either stand up for clean sport and express your honest views about this, or you don't. And the result is what we've seen in the last couple of days at the Tour. When you don't do that, you guys get a lot of flack on off the ball for not interviewing them. And,
it's difficult to interview them and know on what premise you're doing the interview on.
Well, absolutely.
What are we assuming here?
But what you're perfectly entitled to ask them is the state of the game, and to ask them about doping in the sport and where that is now. But if they're going to come back and say, well, actually there's a clause in my contract that says I can't discuss that, well, I'm sorry, tough.
So just to tell you exactly what the comments were that Paul Kimmage is referring to there, he was speaking, the place where I read the comments anyway was with Eoin Sheahan in the Irish Times. He might have been speaking elsewhere as well. And this was before the WADA ruling on Chris Froome, before WADA said it's okay for Chris Froome to ride in the Tour de France. So Dan Martin said, I'm not technically allowed to comment on it. The team told me not to, but I don't really care. We don't know anything, do we? It sounds horrible sitting on the fence, but we don't know the facts, and it's hard to comment. It's a situation we're in. Nobody knows anything, not even his own teammates know anything. It's all kept very hushed, and when we find out the facts, then we can make a comment. But for the time being, either way, it's a mystery as to what seemed to have happened. I don't think it affects my race that much at all, whether he's there or not. I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing, and then if he is there, he's just one more person to beat. So I don't really care is the line that kind of stuck out to me there.
I think that's slightly unfair on Dan though as well. Maybe he's a cyclist. These are colleagues and peers of his. He's not condoning anything there.
No, of course he's not.
I wouldn't be too harsh on him. And Paul Kimmage has obviously built a strong career around going after cheats and all that. And he obviously is still extremely vehement when it comes to stuff like that. But I wouldn't be too hard on Dan there.
Yeah. The thing is, whenever I see comments like that from any cyclist, and again, if I saw this from a cyclist that wasn't Irish, I'm thinking to myself, well, the biggest problem with cycling over the past forever really has been...
Why is his Irishness of any relevance?
Because suddenly to be fair...
All is fine.
Yeah, all is fine. That's what you naturally think. No, that's not what you naturally think. You start to change your view on things because it's like, well, surely one of our own countrymen
would never.
You would never. But that's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is about the quotes, about if I don't know, a non-Irish cyclist said the exact same thing here. The first thing I'm saying is, well, the problem with cycling over the past forever, as I said, was omerta. It's, not saying anything about other cyclists. And to be fair, Dan Martin doesn't have to say anything. as you said there. He doesn't have to say anything. He's not the person under question here. It was Chris Froome under question, and he doesn't have to kind of comment on it. But ultimately, that is the reason why cycling was in a hole and dug itself deeper into the hole, was because nobody was willing to speak out about it. But, you know, if you're in Dan Martin's position, what do you do? Like, just to kind of finish up on this point, the Paul Kimmage piece from last year, as I mentioned, Paul Kimmage talks about joining a new team in 2008, or up until 2008. So Martin talks about finishing second overall at the Val d'Aosta in Italy. Slipstream, which is an American team run by Jonathan Vaughters at the time, were at the race, and he got a call from them afterwards to turn pro. He didn't want to rush it. He'd only just started to be successful again, and didn't want to have pro and have his arse handed to him, as he said. So Jonathan agreed to delay it for a year. Kimmage says until 2008. Dan Martin says yes. Paul Kimmage says, was there any other suitors? And then Martin says, I probably could have gone to any of the French teams, but I respected the fact that Slipstream had come in first, and their anti-doping philosophy, they were the first team to say, we are not going to use needles. We are not going to turn a blind eye to this. It wasn't popular. A lot of the other teams resented them for it, but it was exactly what I wanted to hear. So Dan Martin has spoken about this previously and has said, this is my stance, this is where I'm at, and, you know, the unusual stance of a no needles policy was something that I supported. So he's on the record as saying that, and maybe taking that into account, maybe that's why personally I'm looking at those Froome comments as a little bit disappointing. But ultimately, the one definite here is that we watched him on the Moor de Bretagne yesterday with a sensational performance. It's going to be very interesting to see how he does as the tour moves into the Alps, into the Pyrenees over the next couple of weeks. It's a fairly grueling tour coming up. They go to Roubaix in a couple of days as well, which is all cobblestone. So, like, he could suffer a puncture, anybody could suffer a puncture and fall 10 minutes behind on the cobblestone. So anything is likely to change. It's a magnificent achievement for anybody to win a stage of the Tour de France. And as I say, himself and Sam Bennett really kind of casting a light on Irish cycling and the success stories this year. So there's no question about that. They are the facts that we have in front of us. We will move swiftly on. We want to get to Mike Quirke in the next couple of moments. On the front page of the Irish Times sports section this morning is It's coming home, a big part of England's downfall. That's Ken Early's piece. And Croatia trump England in jingoism. That's Emmett Malone's piece there on Sports Friday in the Irish Times. The back page of the Times Ireland edition then this morning is Sarri lined up to replace sacked Conte, and Bray squad may strike over wages. Johnny, we'll get to this a little bit later on in the show. The Bray story, it's really gone to a different level entirely now at this point. It's when was the last time they got paid?
Yeah, the last time they got paid was the 25th of May.
Right.
It's actually tragic because obviously, as we'll show here, you know, we're in the middle of the LOI in Europe, which is the best time of the year really to be League of Ireland fan, when the teams are taking on better opposition like Legia Warsaw in Europe. And the back page of the Times there is about Bray Wanderers players going on strike.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming the Times.
No, of course. Like there's only one place to blame there, really, isn't it? The front page of the Racing Post then is Alpha Female, Harrington's brilliant Royal Ascot winner Alpha Centauri out to take control in the Falmouth Stakes on day 2 of the July Festival. You actually just mentioned this before we came on air. Alpha Centauri, a good chance today?
She's obviously a hot favourite today, but she's a real superstar, you know, and Jessica Harrington has kind of come into flat horses a bit later on in her career. She's I think Jessie's 71 now, but this is one of this filly's performance at Royal Ascot. She could be an absolute sensation, and she'll be one of those horses today people just cannot see beaten, but she's physically a monster, and she's a hell of a filly, really is.
You've got the tabloids there?
I do. So, well done is obviously the Irish Daily Mirror. Kenny's Lily White's do us proud, a great win in Estonia, and obviously as a pro League of Ireland man, I think it's lovely to see that they've given so much stock to probably a routine enough win for Dundalk against Levadia Tallinn. I think most people expected. You know, the other three teams didn't. The other three teams all lost, but Dundalk have kind of set a higher bar really in Europe. The Herald roar for 4 Kieran Whelan on why his series test from Donegal exactly what Dublin need. And obviously that's something to get very excited about over the weekend. The start of the Super 8s and Dan's Tour de Force, which is, go with that, Tour de Force.
Tour de Force.
Happy enough with that?
Yep.
Martin targets overall victory after a stage win. Rossi's make 2 changes. I couldn't but note the John Small failed attempt to get his his ban turned around was mentioned there. And I actually met him lately because he's into the horses, and he insists. John Small, he loves the horses, and he insisted. You know, I play a bit on the edge, but I did not mean to strike him at all. It was just purely, and I believed him anyway.
It did, like, he went for the ball, didn't he?
He did. It looked worse than it was, kind of, you know. And
it was just kind of funny when you were listening to some of the comments afterwards. People saying like he accidentally punched him in the face.
Yeah.
Like,
in fairness to John, he's an intelligent lad. He's not going to do that in a game of no consequence either.
Naturally.
But he's had a tricky campaign with injuries and suspensions. So let's just hope it picks up from out for the Conte, Sarri in waiting. Obviously, we dealt with that. Juan Martin as well. And Delight for Town on the Dylan one. Dylan Conley, Cryomia River. Kyle Walker looks good at chilling out in the cryotherapy bath. It's the last thing you need after, you know, what happened there. And the long goodbye. And Talon in a day's work in the Irish Daily Star, which is obviously a play on all in the day's work. I'm actually getting tired going through all these puns here at this hour of the morning.
It's tough work.
And Peter backs Hart. Yet another Tyrone person comes out and defends Mickey Hart. It seems to be sacrosanct. If you're from Tyrone, you know, it's kind of like if you're from Pyongyang, you're not going to criticise, you know, the great leader. But it's amazing in Tyrone. They just never seem to criticise Mickey Hart.
Joe Raleigh, except for Sean Kavanagh, of course.
Sean Kavanagh, fair enough. Probably the only person I can think of, maybe. But did I get through the Daily Mail? I did.
The Daily Telegraph, I think, is up next. Here we go. So Gareth, where do we go from here? Couple of columnists there, and
I've missed this now, so I've missed the analysis of this Croatia, you know, defeat or whatever, and just my overriding thought about the game was, why were they so deep for so long, holding on to a lead? And it's like, I think it's some part of our psyche as well. We probably would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Do we not have the belief in this part of the world to just take teams on that really we should be beaten? And I mean that when I say we, I mean England in this case. Like, and even the League of Ireland guy last night was talking to me about Shamrock Rovers' defeat. He was like, going in there just not believing you're going to win the game. But I was with England, like 1-0, you're in control. Why not assert that control? And they were just so negative, I thought.
Yeah, it's true.
Fear?
Like, it can't be fear. It can't be, unless the whole England's coming home, the whole confidence that was built up around the squad. Like, they were, like, when, I'm not sure, did you see the Roy Keane on ITV clip where...
I didn't actually.
But, like, basically he's mentioning about England getting ahead of themselves, talking about the final, which, to be fair, was more to do with the media, more to do with the fans. But there was an element of that in the squad where they felt that they were the favourites going into the Croatia match. So...
Which they were.
Maybe it was, like, it seems that they just abandoned their plan, and their plan was actually they're decent at keeping the ball when they abide by the Southgate tactics, despite the fact that they don't have a Luka Modric or an Ivan Rakitic. Like, in my opinion, it was to do with a tactical deficiency that they just abandoned it rather than a lack of a Modric in that midfield, which is why they abandoned it, as you say, why they sat so deep.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of fear as well, that they realised the closer they got to it, they realised. But I couldn't believe early in the second half just how conservative they were playing, you know.
Yeah, let's go to the Irish News. The headline here is Gael fast forward. Donnelly highlights has ambitions for project to revive Gaelic games in Belfast. We want to reach out to Protestant community is a quote there. Of course, Belfast and Antrim in general, a huge potential untapped market.
This is that's actually something I was talking about recently, how probably the biggest failing you could think of in the history of Gaelic games is its inability to attract Protestants to the sport and to the... I know some of the border counties in the south would have Protestants playing for them, and you know, you see in Dublin now as well, like kind of posher parts of Dublin are becoming actually very strong in terms of Gaelic games. But the whole Arlene Foster thing, you know, and it's a point I've made. I just think this kind of emphasis on cultural nationalism that's entailed in the GAA experience is completely anachronistic at this stage. You know, you look at the Ireland under-18 athletics team, you know, the amount of mixed race kids now we have. You look at Gavin Bazuna, the Rovers keeper last night. We're changing as a nation, and we have to attract kids from different backgrounds to games, but specifically the Protestant community in the north. And we're not going to attract Protestants to play Gaelic games if we insist on, like, you know, playing old Republican tunes before All-Ireland finals and all this emphasis on flags and anthems and all this, you know. It must have been difficult for Arlene Foster to go to that game, but there's a massive section of the island of Ireland which does not play Gaelic games, and it's an absolute tragedy, because every time I go up to East Belfast or anywhere like that, I always leave and say I want to bring you to a hurling game because there's nothing like it. But the 5 minutes before the start with the Artane Boys band, you know, and then the national anthem, I'd be like, ugh. I'd feel a bit edgy.
It's a very good point about the Protestant community. I do think
there's absolutely no reason.
No reason whatsoever.
Just like a Catholic should be playing cricket.
True. Like the thing with like, you've got your own views on cricket, but in terms of why you should or shouldn't be playing it. But anyway,
you have.
No, you do. I want to remember the last time we were in studio together was the week of the Australian cricket fiasco, where let's just say we kind of took the piss a little bit too much about the Australian situation.
I'd forgotten about that. I don't have no issue at all with cricket. I think in the south anyway, we're becoming a really secular nation, and we just play into different sports, and it's just.
I do think the GAA has tapped into a multicultural community.
Yeah,
like it is to do with, when you look above the border, when you look about the lack of people in Belfast who are playing the games, like there's definitely a point in that.
I've seen that map of Ireland by GAA counties, so it's dotted all over, and you see the parts where it's quite a little bit sparser is sort of part of where we're from, maybe in the west, where it's like, you know, the west of Galway City is quite barren in terms of population. But then when you go to the north, it's basically like spot the Protestant community, because that's not where our pitch is.
Yeah.
And that should not be the case. And it's a big cultural bridge for the Gaelic Athletic Association to overcome, because it's just, you're talking of 140 years or whatever it is of basically this, and it's particularly in the north. Like, for a Protestant in the south to play Gaelic games probably isn't that big of a deal, but it is in the north. And the Gaelic, like, you're talking about the guts of 1 million people there who've no interest really in Gaelic games. That should not be the case, because we have great sports. How could they not enjoy a game of hurling? Like,
it's true, because like when you make the point about the Irish athletics, like obviously athletics is an international sport, but then you look at the multiculturalism involved at some of the underage teams, like Stefan O'Cunbar with Kerry, who got man of the match in their under-20 Munster final. They're one of their goalkeepers, I think he's the sub-goalkeeper at this point, with Lithuanian parents. Like, those parents are coming to the country with no idea of what Gaelic games are, so the GAA has appealed to them on a natural level.
So, like, when did you, without going over the point here, when the Gaelic Athletic Association was set up in the 19th century, it was an attempt to counter what was British, Ireland becoming British in effect, which it was, and it was like, we need to assert our own kind of culture here to the medium of sport, and it's been phenomenally successful. But we're not living in the 19th century anymore. We have to completely, in my view, we have to pretty much start to abandon all the culture and nationalism that goes along with it, because it's anachronistic, and it's actually alienating people more than bringing them in my view.
Yeah, no, I think there's no question about that. In sections of Ireland, the alienation is real. It is. Like, how can it not be? Like, how can it not be if you see the symbolism of it? And like, I'll sing the national anthem.
It could start with changing the national anthem as well. You know what I mean? And that's not the Gaelic Games, Gaelic Athletic Association's prerogative, but it's a long road ahead for us to get Protestants interested in the greatest sport in the world, which is hurling.
Yeah,
you know.
We do want to stick with GAA. We do want to preview the weekend's football, but before that, the Orla Dwyer story has taken on legs. It's an outrageous situation that the 19-year-old Tip Jules star has been forced into. She's captain of the Camogie team, also plays for the ladies football team. She's got to play 2 championship games 4 hours apart this weekend, and she's been speaking to Tip FM. Have a listen to this.
Yeah, I suppose we're playing the football first at 1 in Nina against Kerry, and then we have at 5 in the evening we have Camogie against Offaly. Look, I know it's not an ideal situation at the moment, but there is a national agreement there in Croke Park that the ladies football and Camogie aren't supposed to be playing on separate days, especially with dual players, but unfortunately that didn't follow through with this occasion, and look, there's nothing I can do, and I can't dwell on it too much. I feel like I'm very lucky to be selected on both panels as it is, and I'm just supposed to play my best for 2 of them, and once the football's over, focus on the Camogie. And I suppose a win is needed for both of them. They're both equally as important, and they're both on the same day, and I suppose it's hard that way, but I don't know, I think I'm just going to give it my best anyway and not dwell on it too much and not complain about it. I just want to get 2 wins and for Tipperary, and that's the main thing, I think. I knew playing the two of them that they might overlap at the same weekend, but didn't think it'd be the same day. But no, I'm looking forward to them, and Tipperary need 2 wins, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, Orla O'Dwyer, Tipperary camogie captain and footballer with the inter-county football team, speaking there to Tip FM yesterday. Mike Quirke joins us on the line. Good morning to you, Mike.
Hey, good morning.
We do want to chat about the Super 8s. That's going to be the bulk of this piece, but I just want to get your quick take on the Orla O'Dwyer situation there. It seems like the death of the dual player is upon us in the men's game, but in the ladies' game, it's already further down the line. I mean, there's no chance for this young woman to actually play both her games. Captain of one of the sides has to make a 30-kilometre journey between games under one day.
Yeah, you see these come up every so often, and they're probably at this stage, they're probably still the exception rather than the rule, but it's just like it's a farcical situation that has, whether it's a men's game or a women's game, it's a ridiculous scenario that they're trying to get somebody to play 2 championship games in the same day within a matter of hours. And I mean, this facade then about player welfare and stuff like this, that you hear about is just, it's kind of laughable when you see situations like this. But to be fair, I think we're starting to see them probably a little bit less, but still, it's farcical.
Yeah, like you see a bit of it across all the GAA games at the moment, Mike, in terms of fixture organisation, in terms of, say, underage games being played on the same weekend as a senior game, and they're at varying parts of the country and all of that. Like, it kind of comes back to the idea of a holistic view towards fixtures in the GAA, and that solution doesn't seem to be coming anytime soon.
No, and it needs to be a serious discussion that involves all the key stakeholders to actually come up with some kind of a solution. But this is a really complex and multi-layered kind of problem that's involving so many different groups, even within counties, even like you talk about fixtures in Kerry alone, club fixtures, and when you look at what goes into actually trying to avoid clashes and avoid these kind of collisions, you're taking in, hurling and under 20 county hurling, and something that you'd never factor into in club fixtures in Gaelic football with Kerry, and then when you bring that to kind of a national stage, like, it's nearly impossible to get a scenario where there isn't going to be some certain level of compromise where games are clashing, and it's far from ideal, man. It's a disaster, especially in this particular case. But I just think it's so difficult that it's going to take some people to really get behind the table, get around the table, and actually put everything out in front of them and have a clear look at it, because I don't know that that's really happened, as of yet, which in 2018 you'd think that was something that would have taken place a long time ago.
Yeah, definitely. Let's have a look ahead to some of the games this weekend, because we might not have a lot of time, because there's a lot of games. It's a massive weekend of football. It's a festival of football upon us for the next 4 weeks, Mike. Kerry against Galway, I suppose, is the natural place to start. It's the 4 o'clock game on the Sunday. And I guess the opposite ends of the spectrum are very evident here when you look at their recent record in Croke Park. Kerry, a team obviously well used to the surrounds of Croke Park. Galway with a desperate record there in Championship over the last 15, 16 years. So, like, say, for example, in your days as a Kerry man going to Croke Park, do you get a natural boost from the stadium? Do you go in there rocking and thinking, we've got an advantage, we've got a couple of points of an advantage just by the virtue of playing here in the stadium?
Yeah, Kerry, anytime we went to Croke Park, it was always very natural surroundings, and guys were very comfortable, and you always had that kind of sense that you could do stuff in Croke Park and that maybe you couldn't do in other grounds, and you had that sense of a buzz and energy out of the whole ground. And I'm sure everybody gets that when they go there, but there's certainly a familiarity there with the Kerry players that they just know where they go in the dressing rooms. They know all those small tiny little nuances that help make a little difference and make you more comfortable. Now there's so many new guys, just seven debutants obviously, so those guys will probably, even though they've been there through the minor runs and had great success in Kerry minor teams, they still won't have built up that same level of familiarity. But look, I don't think any Kerry guy ever complains about going to Croke Park to play a game.
No, definitely not. How do Galway win this game? How are they going to approach it? Because of what happened last year, there seemed to be a chasm between the sides, but they've narrowed that up nicely as a result of the league win in Tralee.
Yeah, I don't think last year's result was going to have any bearing on this thing. You've got two virtually different, teams. Galway in terms of their structure as opposed to the personnel, and Kerry's personnel is just so different than it was obviously 12 months ago. And I think this is a very winnable game for Galway. I don't think they will win it, but it's a game that can go either way, depending on how Kerry come out of the blocks. And when you look at what happened to Cork, against Tyrone, like, we just have no clue where this Kerry team were at. We thought we had a decent kind of idea of the level that they've been at and the performances they put in the 2 games in the Munster Championship. But I mean, both Clare and Cork just capitulated, and we have no clue really how good or bad these young guys are just now. As good as we hope that Clifford and Shawnee Shea and Gavin White and all these guys are, and how good they've looked, this is going to be the real test of them, to see how exactly they stand up against this kind of Galway structure, I suppose.
Well, that's it. I mean, Galway breaking from deep is going to be the real litmus test of this Kerry team. Like, even if you look at the 2014 game between the sides, there was a couple of hairy moments for Kerry in the first half where Galway just tore through the middle of them, and that has been the story of Kerry ever since the All-Ireland in 2014, particularly last year against Mayo. Can you see this Kerry defence parting like the Red Sea again at multiple times in the business end of this championship?
Well, that's the question we won't know until 5:30 on Sunday. Like, even last year, you go back to 2014, you go back to last year's game, even when Kerry won that quarter-final comfortably, like, there was still loads of times where Comer just put his head down and started running and was just gone by guys, and we probably didn't have the pace or the athleticism to actually stop those guys. Now, I think what you have done with so many young guys is you've introduced huge legs and energy and running power into all over the team, but particularly at the back as well. And with the addition of James Weldon as the kind of basketball coach, who seems to be getting a lot of praise for some little structural kind of things that he's done. It'll be interesting to see, do those things culminate into a better defensive performance whereby we can stop the run, which is what Galway really want to do, obviously, through the likes of Comer and Shane Welch and all these guys,
Yeah, it's kind of ironic though, because, like, you're right, we have no idea how that defence will hold up, but what we do know is that Kerry seem to have become a more attacking team after what happened to Mayo last year, when clearly the defence was the issue. So maybe it's just, overcompensating at one end to make sure the weakness doesn't get highlighted too much.
Yeah, and again, look, if the three of us were playing against Cork, maybe we would have put up as big a score. It's like, I know we're all getting really excited. We've done it down here. Look, we've got very excited about the attacking displays that we've seen against Clare and Cork. But Jesus, look, that was like junior opposition to what you're going to see against the Connacht champions. Like, these guys are after being built. I think that game against Kerry in the quarterfinal last year, where they just had no defensive clue of how to stop Donny, how to stop James O'Donoghue, how to stop Gainey. I think that game was kind of they went out and they got Paddy Talley as a maybe a defensive minded coach. And they've just become a different animal in terms of the way they set up completely. It's so obvious, obviously, what they're doing, but it's really effective, and they have the players with the athleticism and the defensive mindset to be able to do that. Now, it's just going to be fascinating to see if they can pull it off in Croke Park, and if they can make a big difference in terms of not allowing Kerry the space to Cliffords and Shawnee Sheas and Gaineys and the guys that look like they're really on fire. Can they really turn this into, a claustrophobic kind of an atmosphere that they don't get time on the ball? And then the other side of it is, can they go and transition the ball and run down Kerry's throat? And, Gavin White, while he looks so exciting, can he, physically stand up to the likes of Comer and these guys who are much further down the line in terms of their physical development? So, there's loads of kind of imponderables that we just won't know about. And I think you're going to have such a better idea of both teams after this weekend, particularly Kerry, because, we know what Galway have done, and we know what they've done in winning the Connacht title and beating Roscommon. We're just up in the air with this Kerry group at the moment.
Yeah. The last thing on Kerry then is the Kieran Donaghy element. You mentioned him obviously in the context of last year when he destroyed Galway really, but he seemed to be fairly sharp when he came on against Cork, and you do wonder, like, he seems to be a plan B this year, and he seems to be happy enough to be coming off the bench. But you do wonder against this Galway team, is there a potential for him to be a plan A?
I'd be surprised. I think like Paul Gainey and James O'Donoghue and David Clifford, I think that's your plan A for this year. And it's a pretty decent plan A. And then you're looking at Stephen O'Brien, obviously, on the wing. I would imagine it'd probably be the same six. Micheál Burns might be the only guy that comes under pressure on the other wing, obviously, because he was taken off in the Munster final against Cork. He was about the only guy that didn't, probably play well that day. And Kevin McCarthy came in and had a big game. So, you've got realistically now with the midfield of Dave Moran and probably Jack Barry, And then you're looking at Paul Murphy and Gavin White on the wings. You've got 8 or 9 guys really for Kerry who potentially looking, starting a game, that they're guys who are potential scorers and they want to get forward and want to get on the scoreboard. And it's an impressive kind of a group that they have there with the legs and everything. So I think Donaghy's role is probably going to be, do we need to change it up here with 20 minutes to go or 15 minutes to go? And obviously they've probably worked on that as well. But it's a pretty good option B, but I think he's probably going to remain like that for a bit.
Okay, like in general, it's obviously a huge game. Every game is a huge game. It's like the World Cup groups: win your first game or lose your first game, and there's a huge consequence all on that. But particularly with the Super 8s, I mean, with these provincial winners, if you lose your first game, suddenly you've got a tricky test, you've got a tricky trip, you've got to go to Newbridge or Clones in Galway and Kerry's situations respectively.
Yeah, it's brilliant though, isn't it? I mean, like the thought of, 7 days later, you got to go up to Clones to play Monaghan in that kind of an atmosphere. It's completely novel. I think there's more guys. Holding back and not going to the Galway game, as opposed to, and they're waiting to go to Clones the week after because they just want to get that idea of playing a championship game in that kind of a venue against that opposition, which is a completely new and novel idea for Kerry supporters. And then you got Kildare who are flying in the last couple of weeks after being dead men walking 3 weeks ago. Now they're the team that are getting quietly confident of maybe even sneaking out of the group and getting a big result over Monaghan. And it's just a really fascinating kind of a dynamic that we just haven't seen before, and I think everybody's looking forward to it. I mean, it took a while to get here, and it's kind of been inevitable the team that was going to be involved, but now that you're here, it's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and it all gets underway tomorrow with Roscommon Tyrone at 5 o'clock and then Dublin Donegal at 7 o'clock. Now, Dublin Donegal, I think we'd all be unbelievably excited for it if Paddy McBrearty was available, but still it's only one player missing, Mike. But ultimately, could the big impact of McBrearty's absence be the knock-on effect on somebody like Michael Murphy, that he can't be utilised as much maybe around the middle of the field and they might need him closer to goal to get a few scores?
I'm a huge Michael Murphy fan. I think he's up there with the best footballers in the country. But you're after taking like one of the top maybe 3 or 4 inside forwards, in the game out of your team. Not taking him out. I mean, the guy's injured. You can't do anything about it. But I'm not sure that you can replicate. The kind of, what you're after losing by losing McBrearty, obviously. If McBrearty was playing and the way they're playing under Bonner, I just think it'd be an absolutely fantastic game, the way they've kind of rejuvenated themselves a little bit again, and they've brought that kind of energy that they'd lost probably under Rory Gallagher, that they seem to be just, flying again now and putting up big scores in Ulster. I just think, and I don't think Dublin are probably, at the pitch of where they're going to be, but I just don't think without McBrearty that I don't think they're going to have enough,
Yeah, they're fairly light in the forwards outside of him. Like, from a Dublin perspective then, you look at the likes of Michael Darragh Macaulay, who's having an unbelievable season. That completely transforms the way you look at this Dublin midfield, and kind of like the knock-on impact of the Michael Murphy question previously. Like, you can now station James McCarthy in a different role. Kieran Kilkenny doesn't necessarily need to help out in midfield that much. Like, that's huge. Like, Fenton, obviously the best footballer in the country to a lot of people, alongside a resurgent Michael Darragh Macaulay. You can talk about Dublin fading potentially, but that's not one area where they're fading.
No, he's after giving a new life again. And I mean, it was strange, I suppose. He just kind of had reached the heights and then had started to fade out of it and hadn't the same kind of impact on the game that he had earlier when he started. But I mean, he's just he's like a wild horse. When that guy starts running and rampaging through the middle of the ground, whether it's winning frees or, he puts defensively, he puts you under so much pressure just with his running. He's never going to be a guy that's going to kill you with kick passing or with kick and scores from outside the 30. But he's just so aggressive in terms of his running with the ball, and it causes so much problem for the defences. And then on the other side of it, he's such a great foil for Fenton. He allows Fenton to go and get forward, knowing that I got a safety blanket behind me that if my man goes or if somebody else goes, I'm going to go and cover. And he's a big part of it. But I still think if you can't take away from Dublin, you can't take away the fact that Diarmuid Connolly is over sunning himself, kicking ball over in the States. Like you just can't. Like Mayo had them on the rack. They had him by the throat last year until Connolly came on and changed the whole dynamic of the game. And when you take out a piece like that, and you're adding in, we'll say, Niall Scully obviously starting, or Paddy Andrews, who's probably not playing as well as he has done. I know you're talking about Cormac Costello coming back into the mix, and potentially Bernard Brogan maybe in another couple of games, and I still think they're going to be a little bit off where they were last year. Now that might still be good enough to go and win All Ireland, but I still don't know that they're going to quite get back to where they have been in the past 3 years.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and then I wonder how much have we read into Dublin and how much we've undervalued the absence of Cian O'Sullivan at times this season, and he's a piece of the jigsaw about to come back in, and I do wonder if Dublin are going to benefit from the added situational awareness they would have gained from not having Cian O'Sullivan there, from the likes of Johnny Cooper having to at times slot into that role, and those set of backs having to figure this out for themselves without Cian there.
Oh yeah, look, he's a huge part of what they've done. I mean, defensively, he's been the linchpin for the last number of years, and his ability and his communication with the other defenders to be able to get back at the top of the D and block off so much has been crucial to them. But I'm still talking the other side of the ball, as they say in American football. I still not sure that nobody, it mightn't be Kerry, it mightn't be Galway, they may go and win the All Ireland at a canter, and that's a distinct possibility. But I just think in those games, if they get to a situation like Mayo had them in, where they need scores and scoring is at a premium, and guys are able to run with them, do they have those guys that can come on now and change the game the way that Connolly was able to do? And I'm just not sure that at the top end of the field that those guys, Brogan's injury, there's no guarantee Brogan's going to come back at the same level straight away this year that he was at. And there's just you're taking those pieces away, and eventually, it's fine to look back in hindsight and say, yeah, look, they were missing these guys. There's a possibility that attacking wise they may not be as strong as they have been in a couple of years. They probably go out now and kick 7-27 this weekend or something, but that's my take.
I just want to get your quick take on Tyrone as well. It's interesting to wonder how they are compared to this time last year, because we often forget that they absolutely destroyed Armagh in the quarterfinals last year.
Yeah, and they look good. I don't think they're doing anything hugely different to what they were doing. Last year, people talk, that they've changed the whole pile. I'm not sure that they have changed the whole pile. I just think they're doing it a little bit better, what they are doing. Conor McCalskey is probably after getting a little bit better, and he looks like a real player for them. And they need those, I suppose like Dublin, they need those inside forwards. They need those guys that can really be at the cutting edge, the way they had when they were really, really successful back in the 2000s. You still need those one or two guys that are big score getters for you. And I just think their whole setup is very much based on the same setup as Colm Kavanagh dropping back. They're defensively so solid, so sound, and then getting out and using their runners, using the pace and the athleticism they have. And again, with the likes of McCalskey and guys that are able to get scores now, it's just happening a little bit easier for them. And it's good to see him there. I think the Super 8s is better with a good Tyrone, and they're certainly playing at a decent level right now.
Yeah, we've almost got the full house with Division 1 teams in the Super 8s. Do you want to ask you for your quick predictions on the 4 games, Mike, if you wouldn't mind? I think you're calling Kerry in the first game we talked about.
Yeah, 3 out of the 4 games I think are a flick of a coin. I honestly do think that Kerry Galway could go either way. I think Kerry will do it. I think they've got the forwards that are be good enough to pick holes in that Galway structure. But again, it wouldn't shock me if Galway were to win the game. But I think Kerry might get over the line. I think that Dublin-Donegal game is the only one I think is a banker for Dublin. I just think while Donegal will make it uncomfortable and they'll make it tough on them, I think without Mike Quirke, I just don't think they're going to have enough to actually to get over the line. I think Kildare-Monaghan could be the best game of the weekend. I think that's going to be an absolute cracker. And again, it's a flip. I honestly think that Kildare, the way they're so resurgent now with the confidence and the enthusiasm that they have, it's amazing where they've come from in the space of a couple of weeks. But it wouldn't shock me either way. But I think Kildare might get over the line there. And who's our last one? Roscommon Tyrone again. I think with Hinda Smith and Cathal Craig and these guys, they're lifting as well, and they put in, while Armagh made a good shake of it the last day, they put in a big performance. You probably give a nod to Tyrone tentatively, but again, nothing would shock you in 3 out of the 4 games really.
Good stuff, Mike. Enjoy the weekend's football. We'll chat to you soon.
Okay, no bother. Take it easy.
Mike Quirke there, former Kerry footballer, on the line from Kerry. You heading to Croke Park the weekend?
I am, yeah. Hoping to go both days. Mike alluded to it there, the crowds. Kerry people are often slag because they don't really come up until they get to the final. But I'm fascinated to know how it'll sell, particularly on Sunday, for that Galway-Kerry game in particular, obviously the doubleheader. But I want to see what Galway and Kerry crowd comes up for this, because it'll be interesting. You only get one game in Croke Park in it, like, you know, obviously. So it's what crowd will travel up from Galway in particular. Because I remember you mentioned Galway's record at Croke Park. I remember when we won the All-Ireland, second All-Ireland in 2001, and it was said in the Irish Independent the following morning that Galway are on the cusp of dominating Gaelic football. And we've done nothing in Croke Park since. Like, we've basically been an irrelevance. Remember, like, the Kerry defeat last year was very humbling because it was just how far are we away. But I think we've narrowed the gap a lot, and it'll be a lot closer on Sunday. It's going to be very, very close, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes that huge gap is easier to close than the little incremental games that are, like, say, between Kerry and Dublin. Perhaps that gap is harder to close than the gap between Galway and Kerry.
Galway created a lot of goal chances even, and they've improved exponentially since then.
And, like, to be honest with you, they created a lot of goal chances for Kerry last year with the way they set up, and it was a free hit for Kerry, and I think we were all surprised with how easy that was from their perspective last year.
Shane Walsh's performance against Roscommon, if that's what we're going to expect from now on, we've another dimension altogether.
Oh my God, he was unbelievable that day. Almost one of those days when you kind of can already see the montage at the convention centre in November when he picks up his All-Star. Just a quick couple of comments on the Orla Dwyer situation. This is from Fergal Lynch. Meads Megan Thin will play versus Cork in the senior camogie at 5 o'clock on Saturday, and then against Fermanagh in the Ladies All-Ireland Intermediate Football Championship at 2 o'clock on Sunday. Not as tough a schedule as Orla, but still very unfair to expect her to be at her peak for both games, which is very, very true.
Absolutely.
A couple of other ones, David Keeley on the same situation. Camogie and the LGFA need to come under the official GAA umbrella at this stage. It's ridiculous. Now, there's obviously positives and negatives to all of this. Like, when it comes to fixture scheduling, the GAA aren't exactly the stand-up organisation for this. It's a bit better than fixing, you know, like dual games for the exact same day, which tends not to happen in the most part. But ultimately, the negatives of it as well, will the Camogie and LGFA, the Camogie Association, like, will they be then kind of sidelined a little bit? Will they have as much autonomy as they currently have to affect change? I'm not so sure, but clearly, like, it's not good enough what they're currently doing with these situations. And as John L points out as well, LGFA and Camogie semi-finals fixed for the same day, a joke, total disrespect for the women involved. And, like, ultimately, if
they have to realise the growth industry that ladies Gaelic football has become as well. You know, the crowd that was in Croke Park for the final last year, it's probably a great success story, like, in terms of how many people now really do actually follow it and take it a bit more seriously maybe as well.
Yeah, it's a shame, because I think last year kind of felt like a momentum shifter. It felt like, obviously, it was the biggest Ladies All-Ireland in history in terms of attendance, but even with, like, the documentaries made about the Dublin teams in the winter and stuff, there's an association. We know the players a lot more than we would have done, as much as some of the men's teams at this point. And how do you build on that momentum? And it feels like something like this could puncture that momentum to a certain extent, where it's like the attitude, clearly they're not getting the respect sometimes from their own organisations. How can the rest of the public give it the respect it deserves?
Sure, absolutely.
We do want to talk a little bit of football. John Duggan will be with us shortly from Moscow, but one story that caught our eye over the last couple of days, or kind of caught our eye a couple of weeks ago, was a Nikola Kalinic story, the fella who left the Croatia camp after refusing to come on as a sub against Nigeria in their first game on that Sunday, the first Sunday of the World Cup. Imagine being him right now, getting to a World Cup final, or their country getting to a World Cup final, and he's not there. Like, how would you feel?
Because he did that in the first place, I don't know, I can't imagine how he feels, because, you know, to do that at all, you know, he obviously has a bit of Balkan kind of fieriness in him or whatever. But no, I mean, why would you not come on, even if it's like with a second left, you're representing your country in the World Cup? I think the League of Ireland needs the likes of him to join the League of Ireland team now, just to give it a bit more excitement, you know, because he obviously is a bit of a character. They're a very likeable team, Croatia, though. And
they are, and I think we're going to get the take of John Duggan on that, because I'm sure you'll recognise the music. You've been at a Pearl Jam concert, but this is the music of the moment. This is John Duggan's music, and a very good morning to you, John. Hello, John.
Owen and Johnny, how are you doing?
How are you, John?
Good, thanks.
We're winding down, John. It's almost the end of the road. It's been emotional, as we've said multiple times in the show. You're looking ahead to the World Cup final this weekend, of course, but have you got a chance to have a bit more of a look around Moscow and what it has to offer over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I saw this, I can't really pronounce it, but a Sartinio Palace, most beautiful park that I was in yesterday. I walked around that on a beautiful day as well, and a beautiful day again this morning. So a little bit of downtime yesterday afternoon, but it's very much been on the surface, and that's enough actually, to be honest. When you're working, it's a surface look at a beautiful city in parts, Moscow. So went out of the city into the suburbs yesterday and had a walk around. But yeah, obviously you're trying to keep your mind on the press conferences and the matches, and looking forward to what I would call in my own mind the pinnacle of earth, which is the World Cup final. I don't think there's anything bigger in the world than the World Cup final.
What about Cheltenham, John?
No, the World Cup final, Johnny. As much as I love Cheltenham from a purist and as a racing fan and as a journalist, I think the World Cup final. I'm interested in.
If I get a few
global
points,
sports.
If I get John for a few points in Cheltenham next year, he'll agree that I was right all along.
No, I don't see. I don't drink here and I don't drink at Cheltenham, Johnny. So you're never going to get me for pints there in either place. So the World Cup final is to me, since I was 7 years of age, watching Diego Maradona in 1986 has been the pinnacle for me. You know.
86. That obviously you just mentioned there is your first World Cup final. Remembering 3-2 against West Germany. Like I think for a lot of people who tell me about 86 being the first tournament they remember, they also kind of refer to it in the sense of Italia 90 and the game against Cameroon, and essentially not winning that tournament as kind of like a realisation of the mortality of Diego Maradona. I'm not sure if you thought about it that deeply as a child though, John.
I just remember as a child getting for the first time a Panini album. Now I didn't fit it, but the novelty of a Panini album in 1986, and also the times of the games. They're on like some of them late at night in Ireland, and you're watching this exotic place with beautiful sunshine and huge crowds and the Mexican wave and Diego Maradona, and I was just utterly fascinated by it. And it was such an exciting final. Argentina went. You won't remember, Owen, or I don't know if you remember, Johnny, but. They were 2-0 up, they were cruising, and then West Germany scored 2 late goals, Rudi Völler the second one. And then Argentina, Burruchaga got the winner, and it was just, wow, this is unbelievable to watch this as a young boy. Italia 90 I remember more vividly because I was really hooked on it by then, and obviously the Republic of Ireland had her greatest run at a World Cup, reaching the quarterfinals. And the final itself that year was very poor. It was an awful game. There were sendings off. It was an ugly match, and Andy Brahma scored the winner from the penalty spot after Jurgen Klinsmann, who fell in the box, but VAR wouldn't allow it these days. So the great memories of World Cup finals, Italy, Brazil 4 years later, Baggio kicking his spot kick over the bar to lose it, Zidane in 98, and then Zidane in 2006 being sent off in the final against Italy. We had Andres Iniesta 8 years ago, with that beautiful tribute to Danny Jarque when he pulled off his shirt 4 minutes from penalties, scoring against the Netherlands, and then Mario Götze once again in extra time 4 years ago. So just the World Cup final, everyone, even if you might not like the teams, or you some years you have more interest than others, it's always a standout event that I think generally what I'm saying, lads, is I always remember where I am when the World Cup final is on or where I'm watching it. You're going to be watching it in Luzhniki this weekend, John? I'm hoping so. We'll see what the situation is with passes and that, but I'm hoping so. So we'll keep the fingers crossed. And France-Croatia is such a novel pairing. 2 European teams again. 1998 met in the semi-final. That was a very high-intensity game. Lilian Thuram, a defender who'd never scored for France, scoring twice in the match. That was bizarre. Laurent Blanc was sent off. Once again, VAR wouldn't allow it because Slaven Bilic went down like he'd been assassinated. So it was a great tournament for Croatia, and it's amazing that 20 years on they've reached a final for such a small country. Yeah, it is remarkable. It's a sense that the whole world is kind of behind this Croatian team, but at the same time, part of me kind of wants this French team to actually go and fulfill their golden generation. There's something a little bit heartbreaking when you think about the sullen face of Lionel Messi and his supposed golden generation of Argentina never reaching the promised land. Like we talked about England having an opportunity on the easy side of the draw, but this is also one hell of an opportunity for France, let's not forget. Well, I want winners to win, and I would like the underdog tale of Croatia is great, but I want winners to win, and I think that France, to to me, it just feels right that France would win the World Cup with the talent and the team they have, and the balance of the team. So
it's very hard not to see it, John, as well. When you just go 1-11, they just are a fair bit better than Croatia, and they're playing accordingly.
Yes, I was looking through weaknesses in the French team, and there's not many. Maybe Pavard and Perisic, that could be a battle that French might find difficult to contain. But I'm just looking at N'Golo Kante is just going to track Luka Modric for the match, you'd expect. And Kante and Pogba together are very strong. Matuidi's been playing well. And then you have Mbappe's pace against Ivan Strinic. I just can't see Croatia with fatigue. Definitely has to be an issue. People say it won't be, but it has to be an issue. England didn't have a midfield the other night. France have a midfield just as good as Croatia's, or on a par with Croatia's. And with Mbappe in the team, if they can get the ball to him, as I have said against the England game, could have been 2 or 3-0 up. France have to attack Croatia with pace early on. I don't know if that means Matuidi will be in the team, or they might like the look of the Dembélés, Nabil Fekir, or Thomas Lemar. But I expect he won't make any changes. Matuidi and Deschamps, he's been one of his favourite players, as has Giroud. So I wouldn't expect many changes. But I can see almost like a functional French win. I think if France score, I think it'll be hard for Croatia to break them down. And I can see a 2-0 win or a 1-0 or a 2-0 win for France. So I just think it's the end of the road for Croatia. I think they've done extremely well to get here. But going to extra time 3 times in a row does say to me that there's a little bit of a weakness there. And I think that'll be borne out on Sunday. And I think France deservedly will win the World Cup, because I think they've been the best team in the World Cup. I thought Brazil would win it, but then Brazil's frailties were exposed in the quarterfinal. Who's been your player of the tournament so far, John? It's a hard one to call, lads. I think Luka Modric at the moment. I think Mbappe is a sensational talent, and I'm really enjoying watching him play football. But I suppose for the journey to get Croatia to a World Cup final, Luka Modric has to be up there, even if they lose the final. He's been just what a leader, and even against England, the way he just got them back into the game with just complete composure on the ball that he's shown. And I think he's just. It was when you read about the story of Luka Modric, that his grandfather was killed in the conflict with Serbia in the early 1990s, and he had a tough upbringing, and he's been a great club player, and he's really prospered since leaving Tottenham for Real Madrid. And I just think he's carried Croatia in a way to the final, and he's a tragic hero if it all goes wrong. And if they win it, it'll be such a glorious thing for a country the size of ours. So it's between Modric and Mbappe in my head, but journalists can be funny, or I don't know who actually votes on it. I think it might be journalists, but I think it was Zidane got it in 2006, and they voted at half-time in the final. That's what I heard, the story, and maybe Cannavaro should have got it then. So sometimes the players you don't expect to win it, like Oliver Kahn, do win it, but don't know what you think, but I think Mbappe or Modric are the two. But as I posed this question the other day, would France win the World Cup without Mbappe? Possibly. And that's where, Pogba, Varane and Conte would also be contenders. Yeah, and Eden Hazard's had a really good World Cup as well. Yeah, it's a good point on the winning without the player. Just a comment in here from Noel Cahill on Twitter. He says, really going to miss John's reports from Russia. Can you please send him somewhere else to report live from other such historical countries? That would be your dream job, John, a history/sports reporter. Is Cheltenham a country? No, thank you, Noel. That's a very nice thing for you to say. The World Cup is, I suppose, what I'm very thankful for is to be able to see Russia the way I've seen it. I've been to 6 cities, and just everyone had a little bit of story and a bit of different history, like Kaliningrad, for example, or Nizhny Novgorod being closed cities that were under Soviet rule that foreigners could not go to, and Moscow and St. Petersburg are very, very different places. And obviously, I think we have. I don't think people fell out of love with international football. But I think that it's been a little bit in the shadow of the club game in the last, say, 10 years. And I think this has rekindled the interest, even though Ireland have not been in the World Cup, of people's joy for the international football. Not necessarily from an aesthetic football point of view, but from a drama and excitement point of view. That the best players in the world, Messi, Ronaldo, as much as they can try as hard as they can't win a World Cup. It's sad, but it's just the purity of the international game, that it is a game where you can't, you can't transfer between countries unless you're Diego Costa. And that's what I love about the international game, is the purity of it, and it's the stories that are written, and there being some great stories in this World Cup. I think Mexico was a great story. Germany being knocked out, that was an amazing story. Croatia's journey has been fantastic. England's journey has been great to follow. Brazil once again failing to a European team. So there's so many stories, and when I look back, it's Belgium, the golden generation, not doing it, and there's only going to be one winner out of 32 teams, and I think it's probably something we need to analyse ourselves in Ireland, that having been here for a month, you have to be at a World Cup. It'll be easier when we get to 48 teams, but we should be striving to reach World Cups. If Croatia can do it, if Iceland can do it, we can do it, and we should be doing it. I know we have rugby, I know we have Gaelic games, but we should be striving and doing everything we can to reach major international tournaments. And that'll be a strong view I'd have, because we've missed out on an amazing party here.
Yeah, it's certainly kind of pervaded us over here. The fun you're having over there, John, and the great cities you've been to, we wish we were there. Just one last thing, you're back home for the Open next week. It's not all doom and gloom when you do return home, and you're saying Ricky Fowler is going to win it, John. We saw you on Twitter yesterday, so that's the next job for you.
I think Ricky Fowler, he did a 64 or something yesterday at the Scottish Open. Ricky Fowler loves the wind, nearly won the Masters, and I suppose you're trying to keep in touch with other sports. I don't really know what much was going on in Gaelic games. I think Galway won the other day, Johnny. But you're trying to keep actually away from sport. But I just do feel that Ricky Fowler is been in my head to win the Open. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be looking forward to watching the Open next week. But France guys, I think I'll win it on Sunday. I think they'll cap a magical World Cup with a victory, and I expect it to be a normal time. And Paul Pogba, just in my mind, there's something in my head that's saying that Paul Pogba might get a goal on Sunday, given all the criticism he's had and the excellent World Cup that he's had. But I wouldn't begrudge Croatia victory either. It's an amazing story for a country that has had a lot of pain and a lot of suffering 25, 30 years ago. And the story of Croatia was, in a way, started. Their independence was rooted in a football match. Dinamo Zagreb and Red Star Belgrade, the clash they had in 1990, Boban getting involved, and it's worth following for anybody just to delve into that history. It's an interesting, and I think that Croatian football identity has been very much linked to the country's passion, and I wouldn't begrudge them a win, but I think France will do it on Sunday.
Well, hopefully you get into the Luzhniki, John, and enjoy the match if you do. We'll chat to you soon.
Owen and Johnny, take care. Thank you.
Jon Duggan there, our man on the ground in Russia. He's writer there for offtheball.com, and he'll be back on OTBAM, I presume, at some stage next week, if not on Skype from Russia, before he catches his flight home. We'll get him into studio. So Pat Nevin was on the show last night talking about how Kante reminds him of an Irish football legend.
But is there anybody better in world football at reading a game right now than N'Golo Kante and knowing where danger is going to be?
That's a great question. I don't know if there is. There's nothing jumping to mind. I mean, there's a lot of good players out there and a lot of guys that read it really, really well. But that ability to see where the danger is going to come and then get there at a speed that is like very strange and very hard to understand, and then find yourself outnumbered 2-1 but still come away with the ball. I really don't think I've ever seen anyone do it. I mean, people talk about Makelele's. I was fortunate enough to play against Brian Robson when he was fantastic, but I mean, over in Ireland, you remember it was like Paul McGrath is a classic example of this. You put McGrath anywhere, and no one get by him. I can remember the times in my career I get by Paul McGrath because it was that rare. You don't think about that with other people. Kante's like that. You just don't get by him. Nobody does. And those guys, you talk about them, but within the game, they are so few and far between. Now, I know Paul and N'Golo were different positions a lot of the time. But of that ilk, they are just unusual and strange and weird human beings that could do things that mere mortals couldn't.
So is that just speed of thought? They're half a second ahead of you all the time?
Yeah. I remember having a laugh before. I was chatting to Joe about this a while back. And I said to him, I have a suspicion that they can actually play with time. They've got one of those things for Harry Potter called a time turner.
Yeah, Pat Nevin there comparing N'Golo Kante to the great Paul McGrath. It's a good comparison.
Yeah, actually, not one that I would have thought obvious, but in terms of reading, like Paul McGrath, just the Rolls Royce of footballers, And I remember when I was a kid, we were going to go up to his testimonial, and I very rarely went to Lansdowne Road, you know, living in Galway or whatever. And the night before, my grandmother passed away.
Oh no!
So we obviously stayed at home. So I still have 3 tickets for his testimonial at home. Whenever that was, it was. Oh, that's a while ago now. I was in school anyway. But like my family just idolised him because, you know, you think of those performances obviously against Italy and all that, but my brother and I would have like been defenders when we were younger as well, and he was just everything. His reading of the game, but he's also his panache and his class, and he probably really could have. Imagine nowadays as a kind of holding midfielder or something like that, because he was not bad on the ball, and he would have obviously. I suppose he played with Irish teams that didn't play good football, you know. So he was probably never. In a way, he was probably in a team that is what's still wrong with Irish football, in that we just don't pass the ball well enough. But he was more than able, and just you didn't get around him because he was able to react to what you were doing, and he was able to know how you were thinking at a particular moment in time. But he was able to read the game, and that's one of the attributes that people just either have or you don't, and he had it. What a footballer, what a man.
May 17th, 1998 was the testimonial.
So Galway went on to win the All-Ireland in football that year. I was 15 years of age, and I remember that. And we never went to Lansdowne Road, so that's how much we idolised Paul McGrath to go up for a testimonial. And every time I remember that really touching moment when in an Ireland game not that long ago, he came up on the big screen and the whole place went wild, and you could see how much it meant to him, and it really transcended the sport. And I just wish we'd more Paul McGraths around nowadays.
It would be great. Did you support Aston Villa or Manchester United because of him? A lot of people did.
Yeah, so I supported Liverpool because of the Irish players that were at Liverpool when my brother started. My brother would have gotten into Liverpool because of Ray Houghton and Ronnie Whelan and John Aldridge and all that. And then because I followed what he did, I started supporting Liverpool. And then you look at it now, and the amount of Irish players playing at those clubs is basically none.
Yeah,
it's mad.
Like that was kind of on World Cup Daily the other day. I was almost just thinking out loud, kind of wondering about the notion of England winning a World Cup and the knock-on impact for Ireland. I was probably reading too much into it, but the whole reason why Irish players aren't playing at the top level in the Premier League is just because of competition. And maybe if English football woke up to the fact that there's a lot more good homegrown players. Well, a lot of the Irish people get in there and are considered homegrown because of their access to the academies there from a very young age. So maybe it might have had an impact on that regard, but. I don't know. Maybe it's just reading too much into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I've admiration for this England team. In fairness, it's just I don't think they were quite good enough really when it came to the crunch. But you know, maybe some dystopian future has been saved by England not winning the World Cup. But I think John was talking about us needing to get to a World Cup. We need to look at a lot of deep-rooted issues in how we play the game. Because we would have probably made a show of ourselves at that World Cup playing like we did in the latter stages of the tournament anyway, of qualification.
Yeah, that's a conversation I think for another day. It's going to be a long conversation. We've been having it ever since the Denmark game. The Nations League, of course, coming up this year. That'll be the next chance we get to see them in kind of semi-competitive action. I think Ireland will take that relatively competitively. Let's move on to tennis because it's Wimbledon finals weekend. The women's final tomorrow. It is Serena Williams against Kerber. And today it's semi-finals day. And the big one is Novak Djokovic against Rafael Nadal. And I'm delighted to say that Jon Wertheim, executive editor and senior writer with Sports Illustrated, joins us on the line this morning. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, how are you?
Not too bad. So Djokovic Nadal, it's an interesting one when you break this down tactically and when you break this down into the rivalry this is, because you wouldn't necessarily call this a huge rivalry, but it's so even. I think it's 52 games between them, 52 matches between them, and Djokovic only has the lead by one match.
You're right, this is the 52nd time they play. It's 26-25. But, it's funny because we're getting this at such a strange time in this. We can call it a rivalry. I think that's fair once you've played a guy 50 times. But, Djokovic hasn't won a tournament of any kind in more than a year. So it's a strange time for both players. But this is we were all kind of sort of hoping for a Federer-Nadal repeat. We don't get that, but this is a pretty highly anticipated match as well.
Yeah, it was rather unfortunate that the best day of Wimbledon, I think, in a number of years, is the occasion that clashed with the England-Croatia match, which I think robbed a few television viewers of this incredible Rafa Nadal-Martin Del Potro clash. Like, talk to us a bit about this game, John, because it was an unbelievable match. Just looking back on the highlights, which went all the way, and one of the highlights of Wimbledon, I'm sure, from your perspective.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. They played this match on center court, and in the royal box, they have small little TV monitors. And during the changeovers, you can see everyone in the royal box craning their necks and looking over to try and catch England and Croatia. So you're absolutely right. This match got a little bit lost in the folds of World Cup, but this was the match of the tournament. And Nadal came back from 2-0 to came down from 2-1 to win that match. Del Potro, former Grand Slam champion. This was a nice clash of contrasts. Big, tall Del Potro and Nadal looked like a junior player by contrast. But Nadal's fighting spirit is absolutely, it's not the serve of a John Isner. It's not Federer's grace, but it's this unquantifiable gift in tennis. And this was, as much as anything, less about forehands and backhands and shot placement than it was just Nadal's will, which we've seen any number of times. We haven't seen it here at Wimbledon in a long time. So for him to get to the semifinals, which he hadn't done in 7 years, was a real achievement. This was the match of the tournament, probably the match of the year in men's tennis. But as you say, it was sort of lost in the flaps a little bit with a concurrent football game.
Yeah. Simona Halep said it was the greatest match she's ever seen, and it's funny that she says that on the week that is a 10-year anniversary of what is widely regarded as the greatest match we've ever seen, which of course is the 2008 final between Nadal and Federer. I presume you were hoping for a rematch of that because the whole 10-year anniversary would have been a nice old hook for some nostalgia pieces.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, too, is this is the number 1 versus number 2 player. These are the two guys who have won every major played over the last year and a half. This was Federer trying to be the defending champion. But yeah, it would have been nice just as another chapter in this rivalry that now is, 15 years old, 10-year anniversary. Imagine 10 years after these two guys played in the finals as 1 versus 2. They come back in their 30s, 4 children between them. And I think we were all disappointed. Not just that we were deprived that rematch, but also the way Federer lost, up 2-0, holding match point. To see him lose not just that match, but the match of that caliber and of that sort of rhythm was a bit disappointing to see that he couldn't close.
Yeah, presumably the Wimbledon public weren't too happy to see Federer go out. They adore him over there.
Absolutely. And this has all sorts, for something as crass as television ratings, it's a blow to the tournament, but also you run into fans here at Wimbledon who literally plan their vacation over making trips to see Roger Federer play. There was a story maybe 10 years ago or so. It was sort of facetiously called Roger Federer as religious experience, but as he keeps winning, as he keeps playing deep into his 30s, as he remains the sportsman, free of scandal, it really, you have a sense he's more than an athlete to so many of his fans. So a lot of disappointment when he lost. And again, it wasn't just the defeat, but the tenor of the defeat, that Roger Federer could hold a match point, Wimbledon quarterfinals, and fail to advance, I think was sort of especially disappointing.
Just a quick word on Novak Djokovic, John, because it seems like he's nearing his best form again. Am I getting ahead of myself there a little bit? Can he actually beat Rafa today?
I think I'd say 60-40 Rafa. No question Djokovic is rounding into form, but this is one of the great tennis mysteries. Here was a guy who won 11 majors out of 22 tournaments and just reliably, ritually, almost devotionally was getting to the latter rounds of majors. And the last 2 years, he's been a shard of that player. And whether it's personal, whether it's injury, whether it's confidence, it's been remarkable to see his decline. So it's nice to see him getting back. This is a big test today, though, to beat Rafa to get to the... this would be his first major final in 2 years since the 2016 U.S. Open. Here's a guy who, again, 2 years ago we thought was going to challenge Federer Nadal for the most majors ever. He hasn't even been to a final since 2016. So it's been a remarkable decline, but nice to see him sort of rounding into form here.
Yeah, the other semi-final then is Kevin Anderson against John Isner, the battle of the giants. 6'6" Anderson against 6'8" Isner. And of course, Donald Trump's over in the UK at the moment. I don't think he's going to go watch his countryman Isner play somehow. That would have been quite the element from your perspective to be covering that with Trump in the stands. But Isner, like, what's the opinion of him back home at the moment? Is there a sense that this could be it for him, that he's got one last chance? Then again, you look at Nadal's form at the moment, and that's going to be one hell of a final if it is him against Nadal. It'll be a tough one for him to win.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Trump, because Isner has been outspoken in his support of Trump. And honestly, I think that has impacted the way many fans receive this. I mean, you certainly see this on social media, not surprisingly. But I just think, in general, it's been interesting to see a player, support a political figure who's fairly polarizing. And I think that's trickled down to how this run has played out to some extent. From a tennis standpoint, it's just... It's been a nice run. I mean, obviously, he's, as you say, he's 6'9", enormous serve. I think he has a very good chance to beat Kevin Anderson. I think this is not artistic tennis. I think that, at some level, it's not necessarily the easiest player to watch. It's a lot of aces. It's a lot of short rallies. I wonder if that hasn't dulled enthusiasm. But, it's been, Pete Sampras won this title in the year 2000. And, that's the last time an American has won at Wimbledon. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and where the support lies. If he gets to the final, sort of big serving John Isner, I mean, he's never been to a Grand Slam semifinal, much less a final. It'll be interesting to see where public sentiment lies. A first-timer against a guy like Djokovic, Nadal, who obviously not American, but has more of a track record and more of a global fan base.
Yeah, it will be interesting. It'll be probably great for the game in the States as well, where Isner to do it. And when you look at the women's game, a lot of people will be favouring an American winner, and that, of course, it's Serena Williams against Angelique Kerber tomorrow. Overall, this women's tournament, John, seems to have been pretty bloody chaotic.
The good news is we have Serena Williams in the final, and we have a repeat of the 2016 final. So we have two former number one players, two players who have won Grand Slams. But it's hard to believe that less than 2 weeks ago we were all debating whether Serena Williams deserved the number 25 seed, and when all top 10 players failed to get out of the fourth round, it's funny. This has quickly gone from, do you give Serena Williams a chance, to this is Serena Williams' title to lose.
It's funny how things change, isn't it? Like, how is she playing? Is she, like, when we talk about Djokovic coming back to his best, is Serena coming back to her best at the moment?
Yeah, it is remarkable. And she does this has been a career-long pattern with her, where she looks a little shaky and vulnerable early in the tournament, and then as matches progress and she becomes more confident and more familiar. I mean, she played a match yesterday, Grand Slam semifinal. She played a match that looked like her at the peak of her powers. I mean, if you had covered her face and said this is Serena Williams in 2008, nobody. So she's almost 37 years old. She just became a mother. There's been a lot of changes in her life, and the player we saw, whether it's, I mean, you judge by the sort of the eye test, but also just empirically look at the miles per hour on her serve. Serving 122 miles an hour. You look at the way she broke her opponent's serve. Her match in the semifinals yesterday was peak Serena. And again, this has quickly gone from a curiosity to, in a lot of ways, this is her title to lose now.
Like, she's used the term tennis mom quite a bit. She's quite comfortable with the whole motherhood angle and all of this. And I do wonder, has that changed the perception of the public in London towards Serena Williams? She's often been viewed in quite cold circumstances. They haven't taken to her nowhere near the level, say, they've taken to Roger Federer, for example. And I do wonder if the tennis mom thing is kind of an element of humanisation of her own character, that the Wimbledon crowd are thinking to themselves, we can relate to Serena. I don't know if that's the case or not.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to be too cynical. I think it's also perhaps a way to minimize or at least reduce some of the pressure on her. Hey, listen, I'm just a mom out here, lucky to be here. This is house money. I've got nothing to lose. When in fact, this is really a big opportunity for her. But no, there's no question. And whether she's been terrific in her media sessions, this has been utterly free of anything with even a whiff of controversy. On the other hand, people evolve. I mean, she's not the same person at age 37 that she was at age 27, much less 17 when she played here. So I think some of this is her natural evolution, but I think fans are warming to her. I also think there's just an overall sense that this is extraordinary, and whatever feelings people might have about her personally, whatever her past, I mean, just as somebody who 300 days ago gave birth, we know there was a difficult pregnancy. We also know some of this is physical, but also changed albums and changing biochemistry. I mean, this is a lot that goes into being a mother. I think it's basically impossible not to watch this and admire her, because again, she is playing every bit as well as she has when she was at the peak of her powers. 90 days ago, we didn't know if she'd ever play tennis again.
Yeah. It is remarkable. I do wonder as well, and on a final point on this, John, has there been a big reaction over there from the press corps, from the fellow players, to that Deadspin article there a couple of weeks ago about testers coming to Williams' house and leaving the house without a sample?
Yeah, I mean, total candor. I thought that would get more play. I mean, to me, my takeaway from that story was just she was being tested at a much higher clip. I mean, I didn't read that and sense that there was sort of anything sinister going on. To me, the big takeaway was just that she was being tested more often. And what USADA would tell you was this is just based on analytics. And if you have an athlete and they're coming back from time off and they're over age 30, that this has nothing to do with Serena Williams personally, just her profile would match their data to suggest she ought to be tested more often. Again, having nothing, let's be clear, having nothing to do with Serena Williams per se, just as a profile. Yeah. But I mean, I guess if there was something to read between the lines, I didn't read it. Serena gave her whereabouts, the tester didn't make it. To me, the big takeaway was just she was being tested more frequently. But I think there's really, I'm not sure what the inference was to be made from that. But no, that hasn't come up at all. I mean, she gave a press conference right before the tournament and addressed it, and I thought was quite forceful. I mean, sometimes athletes get questions like that and, no comment, and I release a statement and I refer you to my statement. I mean, she took questions and I thought handled them quite well. But I didn't really read any adverse inference into that whole article, except for the fact that, boy, is she being tested a lot compared to the other American players.
Yeah, well, the other element of that article, which was particularly interesting to me, was the direct conversation she had with the head of the WTA and the head of USADA. Like, is that common practice in tennis, or is it very unusual? Has there been raised eyebrows at the fact that Serena Williams managed to get on the phone to Travis Tygart at the moment she wanted?
No, Travis Tygart is very accessible, and I don't think that's any sort of special dispensation for Serena Williams. I think he makes himself very available. He's certainly very available to the media. I mean, it doesn't sound as though this is sort of more of an informational session than any others, which is sort of how this whole story ended up in the hand of Deadspin.